Okay, everybody, welcome back here at homerecordingmadeeasy.com. This is going to be our second video here of the Softube Console 1 mixing system. Check the playlist in the description box below if you want to see the videos that we did before, and there'll be some more videos coming up in the future depending on when you're watching this video. If you're thinking about getting a Softube Console 1 and you're looking for some information on how it looks, how it feels, how it sounds, all that stuff, this is where you want to be. It'll help you with making your decision or making your purchase decision. And if you want to check out the Softube Console 1, check the link in the description box below. That is my Sweetwater affiliate link, which is great. It helps you support the channel here and what I do here, but you don't pay any more for the product. They're the best customer service in the business. Make sure you check out Sweetwater, link in the description box below. So here we are, we're in video number 2. Last video, we talked about how do we plug it in? How do we set it up? How do we register our software? How do we download the software? And we talked about the overall fit and finish and build quality of the unit. In this video, I want to walk you through the actual controls on both the channel strip and the Console 1 fader. Now, I know on camera here, right now, the Console 1 fader is slightly out of focus, and we're more focused on this, and I will fix the camera as we move down to this part of the Console 1 fader. It's because this is sitting up on an angle, so the camera is actually having a hard time focusing on the whole thing at once. But have no fear, we'll get there. Because the Console 1 fader has so many controls on it, which is great, but some of the stuff is hard to see. Some of the details are a little bit difficult to see on video, so I'll explain it to you as we go along and what we do here. So if we just start over here with the Console 1 channel strip up here, we'll start from left and we'll work over to right. So what I'm also going to do, well, first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about these two buttons here at the top. These two white buttons are our display buttons. So if we hit the first button, that is going to open up the channel strip on the screen. Now this comes with the SSL 4000E channel strip as part of the bundle package. You can also purchase other channel strips by Softube, the API and the Neve, if you want to check those out as well. They're going to look exactly the same as this SSL 4000. It's going to be laid out exactly the same way. And if we look at our plugin on our screen here from left to right, it is actually just the way it's laid out here on the Console 1. So this first button turns this display on and off, which is really cool. The second button here next to that is the mode button, and this is the way that we can display the plugin. I like this particular display, but if we were to hit it again, it's going to move into more of a channel strip, vertical up and down, like you're looking down at a real analog console, which is kind of neat. Or we can do this, it'll just show you the values, or we can do this where we'll put it across the bottom of the screen so you can just look at the metering, or you can shut it off completely and then turn it back on again, and that will give you this mode. So it depends on how you want to look at it. Also realize that this plugin is scalable, so you can stretch it out. I'll do this here. I know you can't see the whole thing, but you can stretch it out across the entire screen. So if you want to blow this up across the entire screen, so you don't even need to look at your DAW, you just want to look at the plugin, you can do that. And what you'll find as we work through these series of videos, you're going to find that you're not going to need to really look at the DAW much. You're not going to need to look at the screen. You're only going to need to look at this plugin window, and all the functionality of these two pieces is going to be just fine. But just realize that you can scale this up or down. So let me scale it back down here and put it down here on the bottom so I can try to get everything on the screen so you can see it as best as possible. Let's just stretch that out. Okay, so those are those two buttons here. Turn it on, turn it off. Right beneath that on the left-hand side, you look at my finger, we have an input gain meter here. I know it's difficult to see, but there is an actual meter here. And again, that represents the gain meter here right on the left-hand side of the plugin. If I just hit the play button here, you'll see that we have, as I push up the fader, let's go back to track 1. You'll see our input meter on the plugin, and you'll also see the lights here, hopefully on the actual hardware unit itself, okay? Right beneath that, we have, in these three orange knobs, the input section, which are designated by these three orange knobs. And again, if you saw the last video, you'll know that these don't come colorized when you buy this. They're actually all black color. I purchased some stickers on Amazon. So for $4, little, I think they're 1-inch stickers, and just slap them on the top of the knob here so I can see the different sections and colorize them any way I want. Easier to see when you're reaching out and grabbing things, which is really cool. First knob here is input gain. If I turn the input gain, you will see on the plugin down here, look at my cursor. Hopefully you'll see that the input gain knob controls the plugin. Again, nice and smooth, no lag, no latency. Right next to that orange knob, we have our low cut and our high cut filters. So in this section here, you'll see it on the plugin, you'll see the EQ as I turn this, our low cut and high cut filters. So we have our meter, low cut, high cut filters in our input gain. Underneath that, we have this little black button here. You may not be able to see it with an orange ring around it. This is our shift button because some of these buttons on this controller serve multiple functions, or it's our fine adjustment button. So if we hold it down and we turn one of the knobs, it turns very, very small increments in fine adjustment. That's what that's for. Underneath our low cut knob here in orange, you'll see 3 buttons here. The first button will send the filters to the compressor section, or it could not go to the compressor section. We have a phase invert button here. Okay, you can invert the phase of the channel that you're selected. In this particular case, we're on channel 1. And then we have a save preset button here if we want to save our own custom presets. That's what those 3 buttons are. Okay, so that's the input section. If we move over to the purple section here, this is our shape and gate section. You could turn it on and off just by pressing that button and you'll see the actual plugin light up. Again, that's the next section on the plugin. It's the next section on the physical unit, which is great. It mirrors the plugin exactly. First knob here is our gate. We can control our gate, and then we have a button underneath that, a hard gate or a soft gate. So it just changes the actual slope of the gate, kind of like a knee setting, right? Above that in purple, we have our gate release setting. We have and then underneath that, we have a transient designer, a sustain, and a punch control. And you will see this in future videos on what this does and how it sounds. It sounds fantastic, actually. Very convenient to have kind of a transient designer built in right on the unit and into the plugin. Above our gate release here, we have a gate meter too, so you can see visually an LED meter here on the gate opening and closing. Okay, so that's pretty cool as well. So that is our shape section. We can turn that on and off just by hitting that button. Or if it's in the off position and you don't want to press the button and turn it on, all you have to do is grab one of the controls and it automatically turns on. Pretty convenient, okay? Next to that, in the center of the plugin and in the center of the console 1 here, we have our EQ section. Again, turn that on and off by doing this if you want. We have a 4-band parametric EQ. We have our 2 knobs here in black. This is our low cut. This is a frequency in our gain. And the low cut can either be a bell, a shelf, or a low cut. And you do that with this button right above it here. Hopefully you can see that where my finger is. That will switch the type of curve that it is. In the center in blue, we have our low mids, low mid gain, low mid frequency, and then we can change the Q value just by doing that and then turning that up like this. We can do this. We'll move that over. So we can go ahead and we can change the Q value of our low mids. You can see on the plugin right on the screen here. Next to that in green is our high mids, same as our low mids. We have our a full parametric Q here that we can change. We'll turn up the gain here. We'll narrow the Q, and then we can change the frequency. And then next to that in red, we have the high frequency selection. And just like the low frequency, it can either be a shelf, a bell, or cut just by using the white button above the 2 red knobs. So these are color coded so we can easily see the different frequency bands. Really cool. And again, you turn it on and off just by doing that. Simple. Next to that, we have our compressor section in brown. Now the compressor section again can be turned on and off with that button here. We have all our usual suspects. We have a ratio. Beneath that, we have a knob here for parallel compression, a wet-dry knob, which is really cool, really handy. Then we have an attack, a release, and a threshold. Above in the graphic, above the attack knob, we have a gain reduction meter here. Again, if I were to hit play and turn down the threshold, you'll see the gain reduction meter on the actual unit, the red LED lights, and you'll also see it represented in the plugin itself, which is pretty cool. So again, you have those nice little handy meters. You don't need to look up and see how much gain reduction you're doing. You can see it all directly from the console 1. Right next to that in yellow, we have our drive section. Again, this is Really unique and really, really cool. Much like the purple transient designer, we have our drive, which gives us harmonic distortion, and we control that here on the right side of the plugin. See that? And then our character, which is going to change the tone of the drive, and we'll listen to that in future videos, but it works really well and it's super, super effective. The combination of the transient designer with the drive circuit is something really unique, and it really can change and sculpt the sound in many different ways, which is really cool. Future videos, we're going to go through that. We're going to demo all of that. Then we have underneath this in black our pan knob, so we can pan. And then to the right of the pan knob, we have this orange knob here. This will actually control the fader. And if you see here, I'm on track 1. If you look down at the fader, I know it's a little out of focus. We'll get to that in a minute, but this actually will move the fader. Okay, which is really cool. Or you can just do it with the fader, which is what you're probably going to do, but you can do it with the knob as well. So these two units work hand in hand and they communicate with each other. Above that orange knob, we have 2 series of buttons. We have a mute button, so we're on track 1 right now, bottom right, left-hand corner of the DAW. I can mute the track, or I can unmute it, or I can solo it with the button next to that. So we have mute and solos right here on the console 1. Then we have our output meter here. You can see where my finger is. Just like on the input side, we have an output meter. Above the output meter, we have a side chain that we can control, that we can turn off, or we can send the side chain to the shape section or to the compressor section right here with that white button. Next to that white button here on the left, we have a button called order. And this is the way we change the signal flow on how the signal of the audio goes through the plugin. So we can either have it go from the EQ section to the shape section and then to the compressor section, or we can have it go from the shape section to the compressor, then the EQ, or the way I have it from the shape section to the EQ to the compressor. You can change the order of the signal flow in the plugin, which is really cool. Next to that, to the left along the top here, we have track grouping, which will allow us to group tracks together. Let's say you wanted one fader to control several drum tracks. You can do that, or you can copy settings as well, which is neat. Last but certainly not least, along the top of this console 1 here, you'll see these 20 buttons here, which is our select track. Now, if you look at the DAW here at the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see right now we have track 1 selected. And in Studio One, the kick drum in brown is selected. Track 2, we'll move over to track 2. Track 3, we'll move over to track 3. Track 4, we'll move over to track 4, so on and so forth. A lot of times, a lot of different surface controls on the market, and I've used them on this channel. When you change channels on the hardware, it doesn't light up what goes on the screen. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The Softube Console 1 mixing system synchronizes really beautifully with Studio One. What you see on the screen is what's physically going on the hardware, and that's super important. That's an extremely important point to make this thing, as you start getting comfortable with it, fast and easy to use. That what you see on the screen is what's happening in front of you, and that doesn't happen with all surface controls. Trust me when I tell you. So that's a really big feature, as simple as that might sound. But that is our track select, our TWIF. So we have 20 tracks that we can select here. Next to that on the left, we have our page button. So because we have 20 tracks, if we had, say, this particular session has 26 tracks. So if we want to get to track 26, we can page over one button, hit track 6, and that's going to pop us all the way over to track 26. And you can see that down here in yellow on my, right next to the master fader. See that up and down? Right? Because this has 26 tracks in it. If I want to go back to track 1 on page 1, I'm going to go back a page, hit track 1, and you can see that Studio One automatically goes back to track 1. The kick track. Here's another important point. I don't want to forget to miss this before we move on to the bottom section here. One thing that, again, I love about this mixing system by Softube that is different than most control surfaces that I've used on this channel, go watch the videos, you'll see, is once again, I know it sounds small, but it's huge it was huge for me. We're on track 1 right here, right? On my screen visibly, I can only see 17 tracks on my 27-inch monitor. If I go to track 20, look what happens in Studio One. The console, the mixer in Studio One advances with the hardware. That doesn't happen on most surface controls. It doesn't, not consistently. Right, so let me do that again. track 1. We're on here on the kick track, right? Here it is. See the fader underneath the video, track 1. You see me moving the fader up and down? Nice, right? I only have 17 tracks that are visible. Over here on the right-hand side in purple, I only see 17 tracks that are visible, right? If I want to go to track 20 and I hit track 20 up here on the console 1, watch the console in Studio One. Watch the screen. And here it is right here. Right? Here's track 20. It advances. Again, I can't iterate enough how huge that is for me. To see on the screen what happens with the hardware as you use it is huge. Okay, so that's our track select, and there's our pages over here. Okay, so that is the entire console 1 section here. Now let's move down to the fader section. What I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to get the camera to focus on this section. Okay, that probably put you a little more in focus. And now the top section will be a little out of focus. So here is the console 1 fader. Not as many buttons and knobs, but still very functional. We have 10 faders here. Now, we have 10 faders, but on the top unit, we have 20 track selects. You can, according to Softube, you can buy multiples of these console 1 faders and daisy chain them together. So if you wanted more than 10 physical faders, they've said that they've seen users put 3 and 4 of these things together. So let's say you wanted to have 40 faders on your desk, just like a real console. You can do it. Put 4 of these together. Now, you wouldn't be able to put it in this nice, beautiful stand that we talked about. You'd have to lay out the configuration on your desk a little differently, but it can be done. They didn't say there was a limit to how many you can do, but Softube said to me, and it kind of makes sense, they kind of say that 2 faders, 2 controllers, 20 faders is kind of the sweet spot. And the reason for that is because, once again, you have 20 track selects on the console 1. So you have 20 select buttons, 20 physical faders. Again, it keeps everything kind of moving together in the right banks, and you don't have to think about it. You don't have to do any kind of the mental gymnastics. Go, how many faders do I have? How many tracks do I have? And here's why that could be important to you while I'm thinking of it. Again, we have 20 track selects on the top unit, but only 10 physical faders. So what happens if I go to track 15? If I go to track 15, what is that going to do? That's going to advance it on the screen in Studio One, and it does. But now that's going to be fader number 5 because it automatically goes over to page 2. Does that make sense? Now, fader 5 on the console 1 fader is fader 15 in the DAW because there's 10 faders and 20 track selects. If you had 2 of these console 1 faders together, track 15 would be physical fader number 15. Does that make sense? Sure, it makes sense. That's why I think, even though as compact and beautiful as this little package is on your desk, and I'll probably put up a video or something along the way, or a picture showing you if it's sitting on my desk. It's very compact, these 2 units in the stand, that it's like this. But if it was me, I think I would have 2 of these console 1 faders. So when I go to track 15 up here, it's physical fader number 15. If I go to track 19, it is physical fader number 19. It's not bank 2 fader 9 like it is here. Although for most of you that are watching this that are a lot more smart than me, or smarter than me, doing that little mental quick math is not a big deal. But when you're moving fast, it is a big deal. And if you come from working on a real console like I do, when I have 32 faders in front of me, I don't ever have to worry about banks and pages and all of that stuff. That's the one drawback about Surface Controls working with a DAW. But if you can daisy chain multiple of these things together, it's something to keep in mind. These things are not terribly expensive when you consider the price of the whole unit. It may be something to think about. Anyway, and you can also, this is modular. You can buy your units, work with 10 faders, see how it feels. If you think you want more faders, you get another one, you plug it in, you're off to the races. Anyhow, let's go back here. So each one of these channel strips, here's our fader. We're on track 1. We have our fader cap. We have our track select button each one of the faders. And again, as I press track select, look what happens in Studio One. It highlights and moves on the screen. It also will highlight and light up on the console one above it. I know you can't see it, it's out of focus, but if I press track one button up here is lit up, track one button here is lit up, track one on Studio One is highlighted. That's great. Above that, we have a mute and a bypass. So we can mute track one. We can solo track one. So we have mute, solo, fader. Simple, simple, simple. If you hold down the shift button, we also have the solo becomes a phase flip, right? Or a mute bypass if you're muting and unmuting all the channels using the shift button. We'll get to that in a bit. That's all the 10 faders. Over here on the right-hand side of the console one fader is kind of our master section. At the top here again, we have our page buttons to go over in banks of 10, just like we have it up here. We have our display on and off. We could open and close our plugin right here, just like we can right here. Okay. Next to that, our display mode is the same as the display mode up here. Changes the way the plugin opens and the way you can view it on the screen. Next to that, we have something again that's really cool and unique about this particular mixing system that you don't get with other surface controls. We have this thing called a drive, a load drive. We press that, whoop, I can open up the plugin first. Silly me, okay? I press drive and a little drop-down menu pops up here. This allows you to change out the drive circuit of the SSL 4000E. Remember the drive and the character up here in yellow? You can change that from the SSL to anything that you have on your system. I have all the Softube plugins, so if I wanted to pick, let's say, the American Class A drive circuit, which is the API, I can use the API drive circuit, but with the EQ, the shape, and the compressor of the SSL 4000. How cool is that? We also have, they have a tape machine circuit. If you have the Softube tape machine, you can use the Softube tape machine drive circuit with the SSL channel strip, which is really cool. Okay. Now, not all of these come with the package when you purchase it. A lot of these you have to purchase after the fact, but if you have all of Softube's plugins, because they make great plugins, you have that available to you just by pressing the drive. That gives you some extra options. No other system that I know of has that. Next to that, we have our settings button up here. This is just going to give you different ways that the plugin, you can view it in the way the different settings underneath the hood. We're not going to go through all of these. You can explore those on your own, but it gives you a way to go in and see the settings of the plugin. You do that right here. Underneath that, we have this fader. See where my finger is here? We have this fader mode, and we have these 6 sets of buttons here. Now, because as I said earlier, these are 2 separate units that can be purchased separately. So if you just had the fader, console one fader, and didn't have that, the faders can control different parameters. Number 1 is volume, which will just turn the fader up and down. That's the most common. But number 2 will be drive. So if I'm on track 1 and I hit drive, now my fader actually controls the drive. See instead of turning the yellow button, see over here on the right side of the plugin over here? Oops, let me bring my cursor over. See this? It controls the drive. Very, very cool. If I wanted to control the character, I press the character, and now it's controlling the character parameter. So this one fader will control volume, drive, or the character depending on how you have it chosen. I can also have it control the input gain with these 3 buttons underneath it. Input. Now I'm controlling my input of my, oh, I'm still on character, sorry. If I got to hold down the input. You got to hold it down, I believe. Hold it down. Now it's controlling the input on the plugin. Low cut, it controls the low cut. See that on the screen, the EQ? See that? High cut, whoops, wrong one. It controls the high cut. I want to put it back on volume. So what does that mean? That means that this one fader on the track that you have selected can control 6 different parameters. So you don't need to have some of this up top if you wanted, okay? Underneath that, we have our layer button here. Layers as well, where we can assign different. So layers are like a group. So let's say I wanted to assign all my drums to a layer. I can do that, and then one fader will control all of the faders at once. We'll talk about that in other videos. So that's kind of a handy feature. Next to that, we have our volume button, our pan button here in black. Okay, panning, blue, blue, blue. You can see track 1 in the DAW is panning from left to right. That's pretty cool. Above that, we have a solo. Again, you can solo up or you can mute, which is the same thing as if you did it over here. But That's how that works. So you can do things in different ways. There's buttons in different ways that you can do that. And then also too, with the shift key or the shift button down here in the bottom right-hand corner, that gives us some extra functionality with the solo button and the mute when you're in the menu and in the settings menu. Okay. So that is the walkthrough of the fader. Now let me bring up a little bit. I'm going to move this plugin up a little bit more just so you can see it. I know it's going to slide a little bit underneath the thing. Couple of things. And then we'll end this video that makes this unique. Another drawback of a lot of surface controls that are on the market and surface controls in general, the reason why surface controls, all the companies that market surface controls, their big claim to fame is you don't have to touch your mouse and keyboard. You could do everything from your surface control. And it kind of gives you more of that real analog tactile feel. Well, yes and no. With most surface controls, that's not the case, because when you're working in a digital audio workstation, what do you have? Plugins. And when you have plugins, the only way you can really open and close a plugin quickly is with your mouse or your trackpad or your trackball, right? So if you have 26 tracks in your session and you have 26 conventional channel strips by any manufacturer, you go to track 1, you got to double click, open up the window, make your adjustments, close the window, go to track 2, double click, open up the window, so on and so forth. What's really intuitive about this Console 1 system and which really makes this great, and I'm going to even move this up a little bit more, and I'm going to expand this and open it a little so you can see the bottom of this plugin a little bit better, is that once you open it the first time, okay, look at the top in the center here. This is the kick track, track 1, right? Because we have track 1 selected on the fader, and we have track 1, or we have track 1 selected on the top Console 1. If I move to track 2, look what happens. The plugin window advances to track 2. This happens to be the snare. Track 3 is the snare bottom. Track 4, look where my cursor is in the middle of this plugin window, top middle. See this right up here? Hello. Hi-hat. Track 5, tom 1. Track 6, tom 2. Back to track 1, kick. What this means is you don't have to now open and close a plugin on every single track. You open this plugin once, and when you advance it on the hardware, it changes on the screen. Huge time saver. That is huge. There are other surface controls on the market that if you map them and you MIDI map them, and they have special function buttons where you can open up a plugin on a track, but it's not as intuitive as this. Trust me, it is not. That's the one drawback. There's a couple others, but I think the biggest drawback about a surface control in general is that it really doesn't take your hand off the mouse and keyboard as much as you think it would. But I gotta tell you, with this system, it does, and you'll see that in upcoming videos. Once you get into this and you know what all the buttons do, it's rare that you have to touch the mouse and the keyboard. So it makes mixing faster and more enjoyable. But the big reason is because you do everything with one plugin window and it advances. At the bottom of this plugin window, you'll see that we have all our faders here, and they're all color coded, and it corresponds with the color coding that you have in your DAW. So all my tracks for drums are in brown, my bass is blue, my shakers are red, and if I move this up, you'll see that in Studio One. My bass is blue, my shakers are red. It corresponds with what's going on here on the plugin window. Again, what you see on the hardware and what you see on the screen are the same. Here's the other thing. As I touch the faders in Console 1, you'll see on the plugin, these are touch-sensitive faders. So now I can see the little mini mixer on the bottom of the plugin window. See that? How well that, and as I touch them, it lights up, right? If I mute them, you'll see on the plugin window, you'll see all the mutes. You'll see this, the mutes and the solos. That was a solo, excuse me. That's the mute. See that? This one is muted. Or excuse me, this one here. And when I touch it, it turns red. Why does it turn red? Because it's muted. See that? Touching the fader, it turns red because I have it muted. If I unmute it and I touch it, it goes back. And now this one is muted. See that? So now if I want to clear all of those, I think I can do it like that, right? How did I do that? Oh, my bad. Click the wrong button. Let me just get off of all those solos there. Okay, does that make sense? So as I mute stuff and I touch it, it's going to turn red, which is really cool. And you can see the levels, which is really nice. This makes things so much easier when you're working with this thing. Is everything is all done, oops, in one plug-in window that you can stretch out across the screen and you can just start whipping around. So that is the walkthrough of both the Console 1 and the Console 1 fader. Check the playlist for the next video where we're actually going to go ahead and we're actually going to listen to this and start using the controls, and you'll see how the SSL 4000 actually sounds. So thanks so much for watching this video. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. Check the playlist below for the Softube playlist for the Console 1, and any other pertinent links will be in the description box below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.